Terrence, did you want to have people share their names before or after Daniel? We're going to introductions.
Oh, well, Daniel already introduced himself.
No, the participants.
Oh, no, we're just gonna move into the intro to the NRNC here.
Well, okay. Once again, my name is Daniel Hall. I'm going to do things a little bit different. I was preparing a presentation last night, and I was like doing a PowerPoint. I said, you know what I'd really like to do? My wonderful wife said, it's going to be low tide tomorrow. And I said, well, why don't I just do something a little live? So in the background here, you can actually see the building, the Nisqually Beach Nature Center. This is our 40th year as a nonprofit. And one of the great things about being in Nisqually is the view that we get from the building itself. And yes, the building right now is open. We've actually opened to the public again. And one of the reasons people really like to come here and find these connections is what I'm going to be showing as I pan around the Nisqually Delta. It's one of the finest estuaries in the Puget Sound. Conservation. Every time I look at a picture like this, I think of conservation and the people it takes to make conservation happen. I'd like to include everybody in our Pigeon Guillemot program and the supporters of the Nisqually Beach Nature Center as part of people that helps conservation happen here in the Puget Sound. The center itself specializes in connecting people to the wonders of the Puget Sound in meaningful ways to incorporate the idea of conservation and what a healthy future can look like. One of the things that I'm proud of saying that one of our hallmarks and the start of the Pigeon Guillemot program came in the creation of an aquatic reserve that basically goes completely around Anderson Island, which is the island that you see out here, whoop, right over there, and around Ketron Island, that little teardrop in the distance over there. It goes all the way up to Tommy State Park. It was created in 2011. It's basically an education reserve, it's a research reserve, and a conservation area. For 99 years, that area is going to be protected. And it's going to be protected by people like us who care about the resources in the Puget Sound. When it comes to that, I remember the Pigeon Guillemot program when it first started. The first year, like Ann was saying, 2013, we're going into our 10th year of Pigeon Guillemot monitoring. And during our 40th anniversary as a nonprofit, that means a quarter of our time has been devoted in some cases to conservation and those beautiful black and white birds and their breeding plumage, going into those little bluffs, gathering that data, and not just gathering it here in the South Sound, but gathering it on a region-wide scale. I'm very proud this year that Terrence was able to bring this story to the Salish Sea Ecosystem Conference. Go Terrence. And we'll be able to share that poster that he shared at the Salish Sea Ecosystem Conference with everybody as well. Really kind of highlighting the data and setting a benchmark of what it means to do community monitoring and bringing that information out and making it accessible for other people and hopefully looking at a healthy future for generations to come is what I like to say. That being said, Pigeon Guillemot program is just one of the things that we do. Our education program has been in place since we started as a nonprofit. Education is a hallmark. I'm going to pan around here a little bit again. We have some kids out on the beach right over there, small family. Just great connections can be had here in Nisqually. Making sure that we're making those connections in meaningful ways. Our education program and Hannah Kornbrath has been helping us with that now. Before her, it was April. And obviously, back in 2000, I was the first paid education director at the center. Without further ado, I'd like to let Terrence have the show back. I just wanted to show you a little bit of Nisqually. I hope you enjoy this training, and I look forward to seeing people out in the field when I get a chance. Terrence, back to you.
All right, thanks, Dan. Yeah, so we've been doing a lot of education and research for the past 40 years, and it's my privilege to be here co-hosting with these folks that are working with this program and really just getting the community engaged in doing science and, making it fun. And so I want to talk a little bit about the program as a whole. And, as Daniel alluded to, this program did start in 2013 and actually is a byproduct of the creation of the Aquatic Reserve. And after the creation of the Aquatic Reserve, there was the formation of what was then known as the Citizen Stewardship Committees, and is now called the Community Stewardship Committee. Different name, same function. But what this community was, or what this committee was designed to do, was to provide an open public forum for people to gather and learn about all of the different issues that are going on within the Aquatic Reserve. Now, our project actually extends beyond the boundaries of the Aquatic Reserve, and that's a really encouraging aspect of the program, because the Aquatic Reserve, relative to South Sound, where we survey, is a pretty small park. So, we're looking at a total of somewhere around, about a dozen or so colonies that we were actively monitoring. And, we couldn't do this without all the volunteers that are currently involved and have previously been involved. We, in the past, would average probably 60 to 70 volunteers. And we're hoping to kind of get back up to that level again. Obviously COVID kind of made for some challenges in terms of being able to, coordinate some new things. I mean, it is a bit of a silver lining that we're all able to be here. We've got Carol from California joining us. We have folks from Anderson Island joining us. And then we have folks locally as well. And, we certainly do miss sort of the in-person component of this program. But, we have a lot of different areas that we've been surveying. And as Daniel mentioned, we did recently present on our work at the Saley Sea Ecosystem Conference. So I'm going to go ahead and share the poster here so you all can kind of have a little peek at that. So give me a moment here and I will get that shared. All right, can you all, do I need to blow that poster up a little bit more, or is that looking good there? You can give me a thumbs up or you can type it in the chat. Okay, all right, great. So in case you can't read this, this effort is a regional effort, and I'll kind of scroll down so you can see the map a little bit here. I apologize, I don't have a bigger map. This is one of the challenges in doing a poster, is because you have to cram it into a really small space. But you can see that there are quite a few different regions that are engaged in this research. And we're doing this research because it is something that it's a species that is designated as an indicator species. And the reason why it's designated as an indicator species, as it's indicated here on the poster, is, well, they're here year round, and these birds, they breed locally. They're one of the few seabirds that actually doesn't really leave to go breed somewhere else. And then they're also very dependent on, the marine environment, not just for the breeding, but also for the fish that they feed on and the fish that they feed their chicks. They rely on a couple of different species that we'll get into a little bit later. You can actually see a picture on the right here of a guillemot with a gunnel. Gunnel is actually a fish, even though it looks like kind of an eel, but it is not an eel. And so, yeah, all these different factors combined together were influential in this bird being selected as an indicator species. And it's a program that's been growing. We are really excited to see that Since the folks on Whidbey started in the early 2000s, it was a little while before we came on. And then after we came on, the program just kept on growing and growing. I mean, in the last couple of years, we've had just a phenomenal amount of growth. And so our goal in the end is really just having more programs throughout the whole state. So, a lot of the work that we're doing is really important because it is actually feeding into the state's ability to get a handle on the population trend. Right now, these birds, their populations locally are stable. You'll see some variability here and there, as you can see in the chart on the left-hand side. The key takeaway here is that the green bars are for Whidbey Island. Whidbey's been doing this for a much longer period of time, so their data set's a little bit more stable versus some of the newer locations, which are, they've got much less data. But even for South Sound, which is represented by the yellow bars, you can see there's some ups and downs there. And then, one of the main focuses outside of just the count of the birds is looking at the diet of the chicks. And this chart on the right shows sort of the general trends here. And what you can see is that for the most part, it's about 2 to 3 times as many gunnels as sculpins. Gunnels being the long, skinny fish, and then the sculpin being a more bony, spiny fish with a large head relative to its body. And then other is kind of a mix of different species, which does include fish that can't be identified. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the later part of the training. So the overall goal, like I mentioned here, we're trying as a region to kind of get a complete assessment of what's happening throughout the state. And this data is really valuable because there's really no one else out there doing this. And the fact that the state needs this data means it's even more important. So, for folks who've been involved with the program, give yourselves a pat on the back for the work that you've been doing. It's really instrumental in really helping us keep tabs on what's happening here in the Salish Sea. So we go ahead and stop sharing my screen. So we talked a little bit about the background of this program, and we've gotten a little bit into what we actually do. So I'm not going to get into all the details of the specifics since we're going to be covering that in the protocol, but like I mentioned earlier, we have a lot of volunteers who make this program go. And that has been instrumental in not just providing the needed support that we rely on to get these surveys done, but also in growing the program. And so, again, kudos to all of you who are here because, this training helps us in making sure that people have the resources that they need to be able to collect data well and collect good quality data. Because that data is how we're able to make management decisions that can have impacts on the environment. All right, so we talked about sort of where we survey, why we survey, and so I am going to let Anne talk a little bit more about just kind of the South Sound dynamics that we have, and do a little intro to the program itself.
Okay, thanks, Terrence. Actually, we do have 15 colonies currently. And those range from Pierce County through Thurston County and clear over into Mason County. So Ketron Island up by Steilacoom, Anderson Island, and the mainland ins and outs all through Thurston County. And then Harstein Island, which is technically Mason County, and over to Taunton Inlet. So quite a large area. The survey itself is done weekly, June through the end of August, occasionally a couple early ones, occasionally in May, occasionally a couple later ones in September. The survey has to be completed by 9 a.m. So most volunteers are out at least by 7:30. It lasts 10 to 12 weeks, as I said. And what we do is we arrange a survey schedule ahead of time now. And that's determined for each team and also by each team, built around their personal schedule and the tides that allow access to the beach. And we do have a couple holes or more in the schedule this season. So tell your friends, anybody you know that would enjoy an hour on the beach watching these birds, because we could use a few more people. Yeah, we're going to give you all the details later. That's the quick overview.
Okay, all right, thanks, Ann. Yeah, so I guess we do have a little bit of time, so I guess we can field any questions if anyone has any at this point about just the program in general. And if we don't have any questions, we'll move on.
Could you share that poster with us maybe so we could
Yes.
look at it a little?
Sorry, what about the poster?
Oh, I just love to see it, to read it more closely.
Yeah, I can go ahead and put that on our website so that folks can get a better look at it. But yeah, thank you. All right, I don't see any questions in the chat here. And all right, I think we'll go ahead and we will launch into reviewing the protocol. So hopefully folks did get the email that we sent out on Thursday that had the protocol and the data sheet. So if you have one handy in front of you, great. If not, I'm going to go ahead and share ours right now. So give me a moment. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and make this bigger. All right, I can't see you all, so someone tell me if this is big enough or not.
Almost.
Almost, okay, I'm gonna make it just a little bit bigger then. How's that?
Yeah, good, thanks.
Okay, great. All right, so there are a number of different foci that we are really keying in on for this study. The count of the birds, that is probably the most important aspect of the survey. So we do a series of counts throughout the survey. We do a count at the very beginning, the very middle, and then at the end. And the middle count is done 30 minutes into the survey, with the survey being a 1-hour survey. The second focus is the number of active burrows. And the reason why the number of active burrows is also important is because this allows us to kind of compare the counts of birds that we see on the water or on the beach or on the bluff, and kind of extrapolate approximately how many additional birds might be entering into the population. So the criteria that we go off of is that if there is, I believe it is 4 to 5 consecutive weeks of fish deliveries to a burrow, we consider that burrow to be active. And we assume that there are 2 chicks in that burrow because that is the average number of eggs laid per adult pair. And once those chicks hatch, we are looking at what kind of fish are being brought to the chicks, how many fish are being delivered. Now, the one thing to really remember about this study is that this is just a snapshot in time. So what we see in 1 hour does not necessarily say that that's everything that's going on at the colony, but it gives us an idea. And that's partially why we also look at what sort of potential disturbances might have an impact on the breeding success of these birds. We do have some locations where there is frequent eagle activity, as an example of one disturbance. And that's something that may or may not impact the birds. Typically, most disturbances don't have long-term impacts. But nonetheless, if you have enough small impacts and you add them up over the course of the season, then there is potential to have impact to the bird itself. As far as the protocol goes, if you have any data sheets from previous years, you can get rid of them. We will go over the new version of the data sheet after this part of the training. One of the really important things outside of just going out and doing the survey is we want to make sure you're doing it safely. Now we have implemented changes over the years that have really made safety something that becomes less of an issue. We typically don't hear stories anymore of people going out and then, they found out the tide was a little too high and then they have to come back and wade through water. We really want to avoid that. So, we've actually taken upon ourselves to actually do a lot of the planning for you and then let you know when there's the good days and the not so good days, and then the just downright bad days to go out. So as far as the survey itself goes, there's a pretty wide range for when you can get out and do a survey. It is a 1-hour survey, so we do ask that you are absolutely done by 9 a.m., which means that really you should be in position, ready to go by 7:45, because that gives you 15 minutes to get settled, lets the birds kind of get used to, just you being there. And this is where positioning can be key. If you're in a bad spot, the birds will kind of tell you, either by just completely avoiding any activity at the burrows, or, if it's the middle of the season and they've got chicks in the burrows, they might have fish that they're trying to deliver, but they might do a lot of flybys before they commit, or they might not even go in at all. But, I know some of you are early birds, and that's great. You can get out there as soon as the crack of dawn if you wanted to. But again, just remember, it is a 1-hour survey. You need to have 15 minutes built into your settle time. So, that's 15 minutes plus an additional 60 minutes of surveying. And one thing that is new for last year, which is going to carry over into this year, is that we are doing simultaneous surveys. Now, this only applies to colonies where there are multiple sites. So that's probably maybe 1/3 to 1/2 of our colonies. where this applies. But you know, for the other colonies where it's just one team and you are able to see all of your burrows, well, you can kind of ignore this part about doing the simultaneous surveys. But for the colonies where we do have multiple sites, we are typically coordinating our efforts so that we start at exactly the same time. And this is so that we can get accurate counts of the birds themselves. All right, moving on to number 7. So the season officially starts at or on the first week of June. So actually Memorial Day is our official start. I was talking to someone else earlier. That was completely unintentional on our part. Like we didn't even really think about Memorial Day. But you know, you can get your survey done by 9, and then you've got a whole day to do whatever it is that you have planned. If you decide you want to start your surveys on Memorial Day. But this survey will go on for at least 10 weeks. There are some exceptions to this, and you'll always want to communicate with the coordination team, so myself and Marilyn and John, and then we do have another intern who will be joining us later in the summer, but she's probably not going to be doing a lot of coordination. But anyways, yeah, so you know, you'll be going out once a week for folks who are full-time volunteers, and for folks who may be either part-time or substitutes. You know, we will be in touch with you on a weekly basis as far as scheduling for the surveys. Ideally, we want to do these surveys about the same day each week. So if you're going out and you're doing a survey on a Monday, try and go out within a day or two of Monday of the following week. We do realize that sometimes the tide will create challenges. And this is why we will be sending out weekly email updates with the tide schedule so that you can reference that, and then you can kind of give us a heads up about what day you're planning to go out. So that way, everyone knows what days are the good days, what days are, you know, not so great, but are doable, and then which days are just not at all good. This helps us in planning because, you know, sometimes things come up and we get it that people have lives, and, you know, this is a volunteer opportunity. So, you know, if you're not able to go, just let us know as soon as you can. And, you know, we'll try and find a substitute and make sure that the survey gets covered. You know, we want to avoid situations where we don't find out until afterwards that a survey was missed. We want to really try and get a full season's worth of data, whether that's 10 weeks or 12 weeks or however long the season ends up being. So the season length is really determined by the burrow activity. So 10 weeks is just kind of a rough guideline. That's the average amount of time that it takes for the birds to lay their eggs, hatch their chicks, raise their chicks to the size that the chicks are old enough and large enough to spend the rest of their lives in the Salish Sea. So we typically will survey until we have 2 consecutive weeks without any burrow activity, and the birds pretty much are not close to the bluffs. This is something that takes a little bit of time to really get a good handle on. Something that I was able to learn last year, just through surveying, is towards the end of the season, for example, at Lyle Point, we did not have any burrow activity, but we actually kept going because all the folks on our team, we were seeing birds on the water holding fish. And usually that means that there's still a chick in the burrow. So even though we didn't see any fish deliveries or any other burrow visits without fish, that to us was a sign that, okay, well, there's still action going on. There may have been fewer birds at that point compared to the peak of the season, which is typically the middle of July. But, that was enough for us to say, okay, we got to keep going just to cover our bases and make sure that we're not missing anything. Again, this goes back to the fact that this is just a 1 hour snapshot. Who knows, the bird could end up delivering that fish later. And one of the interesting things about the feeding of the chicks is that, and this makes a lot of sense for, I think, most people here, but when the chicks are first hatched, they're getting fed often and they're getting fed small meals, so lots of small fish. As they get bigger, they don't need to be fed as often, and so the fish get a little bigger to make up for the decreased frequency. And then as we get towards the fledging stage, which is when the chicks are getting ready to leave the nest, they actually get fed, maybe a few times a day, if even that. And then the fish get really big, and then you start wondering how in the world these chicks are able to choke down these big fish. But they do, or at least we assume they do. We can't really see very well into the burrows for the most part. So, but yeah, that's kind of a neat little tidbit there about the feeding ecology of these birds. So yeah, we're looking to see at least 2 consecutive weeks with 0 bird activity or birds on the water holding fish, waiting to deliver to the chicks. All right, going back to the counts of the birds. So at the very beginning of your survey, you will do a scan of the birds that are on the water, the birds that are on the beach, the birds that are just on the bluff, but we do not count any birds that we know are in the burrows. And this is just for consistency because we don't necessarily know how many birds would be in the burrows. So just counting the birds that are actually visible makes it easier for us. The other thing that you need to really make sure of, and for some colonies, this is really hard, but this is where you coordinate before you start your survey. Because for these larger colonies where we have multiple sites, like for example, A, B, and C, you're going to need to decide what the arbitrary boundaries are for A, B, and C. You need to decide, okay, when we do our counts, who's going to count which birds? There are usually going to be some birds that have overlap. And so, if you run into a situation where you do have birds and you're not sure who should count them, well, just count the whole group and then make notes of that. And then when the survey is done, you just get together and you talk about it and you say, okay, well, at the middle count, there were this many birds on my side. And then there was like this many birds that were kind of in the no man's land. So how do you count those birds? Your angle is going to affect the counts. And ultimately, our goal is to get a colony level count. So, we don't need to get too far into the weeds in terms of deciding, okay, well, this bird was yours. You're just trying to figure out, okay, in the general area, how many birds were there. The boundaries that you devise yourselves, that's just to help you with counting so that you have a certain degree of consistency throughout the survey. We can help you with figuring out how to determine what those zones are. For folks who are new, we'll schedule site orientations so that way you will become familiarized with what boroughs are which, and sort of a general guideline for what are some good landmarks to use. For situations where it's just all open water, that's a little trickier. But again, that's going to be done on an individual basis by the colony level. So when you are doing your survey, you are going to need to pay attention to the active and or occupied boroughs. As we had indicated before, birds that are going in and out of boroughs signify active boroughs, and we will be providing folks with photos that have the boroughs showing on them, and you will be responsible for marking up those photos to indicate which of those boroughs are active. Now, as far as the identification to use for these boroughs, it's spelled out in the protocol how to do this. So this is a little bit, what I'm going to explain is more relevant to the colonies that are larger and are subdivided into sites like A, B, and C. And you can see an example, like we have A1, we have A2, we have B2 and B3. And the reason why we're doing this is so that, if we end up at the end of the survey having 3 data sheets that all say borough 1, that can be tricky to figure out if we don't have the appropriate labeling on the sheet. So for colonies that this does not apply to, you can just use numerical identifiers, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's a number of different ways to do this. You can kind of assign IDs ahead of time if you want, or you can do it as you go. So, if you're out there the first week of the season and you see 3 different boroughs that have birds visiting, that could be either boroughs 1, 2, and 3, or it could be something that you've predetermined on your photo. But whatever it is, we have to make sure that we are absolutely consistent with how we are labeling boroughs. And this is why we need you to provide us with updated copies of these photos. So you can just take a photo of the photo with your markups, and then that's probably the easiest way to share the information, or you could scan and email it to us as well. But in whatever case, each week, if you have borough activity, we'll need you to relay that information to us so that if there is a different team going out, we can get that information to them so that they will be able to use the same borough identifiers. This really helps us in the data cleanup process, because if all we have to go off of are different maps from different people using different identifiers, it takes us more effort to reconcile those differences and then come up with the appropriate IDs. And this is going to be more relevant for the people who are actually responsible for entering the data. But it is a good general practice for everyone because pretty much everyone is going to have a data sheet. And so, yeah. Let's see, anything else to add on that, Anne?
No, that's pretty much it. You're going to talk about team leads a little bit later, I guess.
Yeah, we
Okay.
will get into team leads in a little bit.
Okay.
So we talked about one of the qualifications for whether a borough is active or occupied, and how this is defined is if you see a bird completely go into the borough, that is when we consider that to be a borough visit. The analogy I like to use is someone coming home, they open the front door and they close the door behind them. You can't see them anymore. This is compared to a bird that goes to the burrow but doesn't go in. So it's like a person coming to the door and they just sit around on the porch or whatever. We only count the birds that are going all the way in. The birds that don't go all the way in, well, you can just record that in the notes. It is actually interesting. It is good data. So, if that's the only thing you see for the whole survey, you don't need to feel disappointed because it's still good data. Now, when you see birds going in, there are a number of different pieces of data that you need to document. You need to record the time that you observe this, and you need to record this in the appropriate section of the data sheet, which we'll cover in more detail after this section. You need to record if it's no prey, so no fish being brought to the burrow. If there is a fish being brought to the burrow, you will need to record what species. Now, the nice thing about these birds, thank these birds for having this really weird behavior of literally catching fish and hanging on to them until their chicks are hungry, I guess, which makes it really convenient for being able to ID these birds while they're on the water, holding these fish and waiting for the chick to signal that they're ready to be fed. So you have the gunnel, which we talked about earlier. It looks like an eel, but it's not an eel. So it's long and skinny, and it's kind of noodly, like a fettuccine. And then you have the sculpin, which is a more normal looking fish, although it has a relatively large head compared to its body. So large head tapered all the way to the tail with the body. And then the other unknown. This is a category that encompasses a variety of different species. You have the shiner perch, which is probably the third most observed species. But even that is not something that we regularly see everywhere. We actually probably only see it at a handful of colonies on an infrequent basis. And this is your more classic looking fish, something that your kid would probably draw. It's widest in the middle. It's got a body that tapers towards the head and the tail. And it's shiny, it's very shiny. If it's sunny out, you'll be like, oh my gosh, what is that bright thing that bird is holding? And that's typically going to be a perch. Now, we do have other species. I don't expect anyone here to be very well versed in fish ID outside of the gunnel and the sculpin. And this is just more for informational purposes than it is to really get you trained on how to do ID for these other species. Now, if you're really wanting to get into that, let us know. because we have noted over the years that there are some other species that do show up. Now, before I get into some of these other species, I will mention that the gunnel is interesting. There is probably just a couple colonies that we have different species of gunnel. Most of the gunnels you'll see are brown, some shade of brown. They'll be mottled, and at a few select locations, we actually see red gunnels, which is pretty unmistakable. I mean, they are bright red. I know we have one of our volunteers, actually a couple volunteers here who have seen those, and those are actually pretty kind of cool. Those are really an uncommon species. I haven't read up on that particular species to understand what its preferred habitat is, but outside of the gunnel, there is a lookalike, and the lookalike is called a snake prickleback. It is actually a much rounder fish. It is long and it is actually not skinny at all. It's basically like if you took a gunnel and you treated it like a little balloon and you blew it up, it would be just an inflated gunnel. It is kind of a lighter colored fish. It has a very white belly. So that's typically one of the keys that we look at. Is it has a pale colored body. It does actually have these dash marks on it, but those are really hard to see without really good optics at a distance. And then other species that other groups have seen that we don't see typically, you get an assortment of foraging species like sand lance, or down here in Southtown, we actually have seen anchovy. We just haven't seen anchovy during the survey. And then up north, they see other things like Pacific cod, they see eel pouts, and then I think they've claimed to have seen ratfish as well, but I don't know if I can really believe that. I would have to see it for myself. But anyways, yeah, so we mainly just have the sculpins, the gunnels, and then occasionally the shiner perch, and then also occasionally the snake brickleback. So yeah, reach out to us if you're interested in learning more about some of these other prey species, because we are definitely interested in knowing when these fish show up. Now, there is actually something else that I didn't mention that can be recorded in the other and unknown category. And that is, for example, if you're by yourself and let's say it's the middle of the season, so it is crazy town. There are birds everywhere, they're flying all around, and there's a lot of burrow activity. Well, one of the challenges of surveying by yourself is that you might miss something. And let's just say that out of the corner of your eye, you just happen to see a bird take a fish into a burrow. Hopefully you know which burrow that is at least, so that we can document that. But maybe you didn't get a good look at what kind of fish it was because it was going really fast. That is one of the situations where you can actually use the other unknown. And I would actually encourage you to describe the kind of the overall appearance of the fish. So that can actually help us in trying to figure out what fish it may have been. Because, 60 to 70% of the time, it's going to be a gunnel. 20 to 30% of the time, it's going to be a sculpin. And then a very, very small portion of the time, it will be something else. So the other unknown category is something we don't typically use, but we want to make sure we're getting accurate data regardless of what prey type is being delivered. Now, one of the things that we have learned in doing some of our surveys, and I think this applies whether you're on the beach or whether you're on a boat, but it's a lot easier when you only have one or two birds that are holding fish. But we would say track those birds, because when you have multiple birds with multiple fish, sometimes, like I said, action might be happening so quick, you might be looking down to record something, and by the time you look back up, you're like, oh my gosh, I just saw something happen, and I'm not sure what to make of what happened. But yeah, keep track of those birds with the fish, because they can be sneaky. They will do these flybys, they won't deliver, and then they'll land somewhere else on the water. And then, maybe the other bird will kind of decide, oh, I'm going to deliver now. So, at least the fish are easy to tell apart, the two main common ones. But yeah, definitely pays attention to just kind of really keep track of everything that's going on. And remember to kind of look back at the burrows too, because you can have birds going out of burrows. And that's important information too. I'll revisit this as we get to the data sheet, but I'll mention it now. We do want to track all of the burrow activity, but there are some very specific ways that we are recording the data. But that's what you need to know for now as far as documentation of the fish. All right, that brings us to the guest policy. So we love guests. We love that you bring your friends out. You bring family or whatever. This is great. We love the exposure. We just want you to understand that we want to avoid having volunteers train other people. Now, this isn't to say that that can't happen, but unless you're someone who's really experienced and we've seen that you are proficient in the survey, we want to avoid getting into that situation where you have one person who is not the most experienced training someone else, and then that new person, they may not be doing it quite the way that we need them to do it. So they can certainly assist you with observation and calling out things, but the data recording should actually be done by trained volunteers. Substitutes, we want to make sure that if we are sending out substitutes, that they know what they need to know as far as like, oh, here's all the burrows that are associated with this colony or this site. And these are the active ones. This is kind of your lane for counting birds. These are things that either the volunteer who is the regular there can kind of show this new person, or it's something that the coordination team can also do. We would actually prefer that the regular volunteer be the one to do this, because we can't be in every place and every time. We have a number of different colonies, and so but for new people, this is something that you can coordinate with us about, especially if like you don't have time to do this. Typically we would schedule this outside of the survey hour. It can be pretty much any time of the day that you can meet up with this substitute, or alternatively, they could come out with you on an official survey and they can shadow with you. Yeah, so that's, I think, all there is to say about substitutes. Did I miss anything there, Anne?
Well, I don't know if you're planning on covering this later, but under 12, it's possible to have 2 visits simultaneous. Some often birds will have an escort that will fly towards the bluff with them. And most often they will veer off. The escort will veer off and not go in, but sometimes two birds will go in at the same time into the burrow. And sometimes two birds with fish will go into the burrow at the same time. So when two birds enter the burrow at the same time, it counts as two visits, one for each bird. And if both have a fish, then it's two fish deliveries, where it could be the same type of fish or another type. If one has a fish and the other doesn't, then one is a no prey visit and the other one is a fish delivery marked with whichever type of fish it was. So yeah, that happens several times a season, I think.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, there's definitely some wrinkles to the surveys at times, and we understand that for newer people, it can be a lot to take in. But yeah, one of the tips that I recommend is when you see a bird going towards the burrow, this is a little tricky because remember, you're much larger than these birds, so you are viewed as a predator. So try not to lock on to the bird. Usually what I do, if I see a bird that's going towards a burrow, do look at the bird, but focus more on the burrow itself. And then that way you're less likely to cause the bird to abandon its delivery. Because there has been times when we've definitely seen birds that we thought were going to go in, and then we were staring at them, and then they veered off at the last minute. So there is a balance there, because you obviously do want to make sure that you know what fish they're bringing in to the burrow, and also you want to verify that they actually went in, as opposed to just doing a U-turn. And sometimes the U-turns are a normal part of the survey, even if you are in a good position, you're not really causing the birds to be uneasy. It happens. But that's still good information too. Those flybys, those fake outs, whatever you want to call it, that's good information. Because if that's the only thing you see for the whole survey, that actually tells us, okay, even if we didn't have a fish delivery for the hour for that week, it's something that we can infer that happened. It's extremely rare for us to see the adult not deliver a fish and eat it itself. We have seen it, but it's very rare. So yeah, and then
Also, whoops, I forgot. There may be more than one attempt to deliver a fish. So as Terrence said, keep your eye on the birds with the fish, because they might, for some reason, abort or abandon delivering the fish the first time, but maybe the second or third time they'll actually go in and deliver it.
Yeah, no, that's a pretty regular occurrence, I would say. It's not common to see the bird deliver on the first attempt. We don't know why, it just is. But yeah. So moving on. No pets. That's all I can really say about animals. Because they're just gonna be a disturbance. Back to the data. You need to make sure that you fill out the sheet completely, and we'll go over the sheet itself so that you understand how to fill it out. And you want to make sure things are very clear. Don't leave any blanks, because otherwise we have to assume, and we all know what assume means. And honestly, the clearer the data is, the fewer questions we have to come back with to you later. And we'll talk a little bit more about the team lead role, which isn't really covered here. But the team lead will be doing a debrief with all the folks at the end of the survey, and that's where, if you have uncertainties about something that you saw, that's where you can make a decision after you discuss it. And if you still can't figure it out, well, then the team lead can send in the question to the coordination team. So typically, I would say after your survey, unless you get to your site early, is, walk the bluff and look for dead chicks, which we hope we never see. Look for eggshells, which actually is not that uncommon. And then very rarely rejected prey. Now, we don't have any permits to collect any of these items. You can obviously take a photo. Photos way better because, well, dead chicks and dead fish stink real bad. And then eggshells, yeah, as much as we would love to have them as part of our collection, that's something that perhaps in the future, if and when we do get a permit, we can have some. But for now, just leave them where you found them, take photos, send them to us, record that on your data sheet. Because that's always for us a highlight. And actually, that's really good information because, again, if there was no burrow activity for that week, but you walked the bluff and you didn't see any eggshells the previous week, but you find an eggshell that week, well, that's kind of a clue. So there's a lot of neat information that we can collect at various points throughout the survey and even after the survey. So if you, for any reason, you can't go, let us know. We will provide you with specific contact information for people who will be your point of contact. Typically, you'll have a team lead. Now, there are some smaller colonies that, well, it's either just you or it's you and a partner. In which case, whoever is submitting the data sheet, you are the de facto team lead. And the team lead is basically someone who is going to be the person that the coordination team or the data team will be corresponding with as far as any questions, any concerns, scheduling, that sort of thing. That's how that's going to work. And if you know ahead of time that you're not going to be able to go, let us know. There's no hard feelings there. We understand that things come up. We just want to be able to make sure that we have the ability to cover that if we can. Like I said earlier, we want to minimize the number of missed surveys that we have. And we've done a lot better in recent years. So we're really proud of that. Now, I think I've already mentioned this, but the purpose of the debrief meeting, which the team lead will host, is to make sure that data sheets are filled out correctly, completely. If there's any questions about anything that people saw, this is the review process that allows this to happen. And again, if you can't figure it out, get in touch with us. All right, so that brings us to interactions with people. Some of these beaches are public beaches. Most of them are actually private beaches, in which case, if you do happen to run into someone, just be nice, be courteous, let them know what you're doing, but don't engage in a long dialogue because well, they actually count it as a disturbance potentially. And you could potentially too. So, carry around informational brochures with you. We have them here at the Nature Center. So if you need some, let us know. We'll get some to you. And, definitely, yeah, just be engaging, but keep it short. And then again, we are accessing a lot of these places through private property, so respect that private property. Just go and do your thing. Don't bother anyone. Don't disturb any property. Yeah. All right, so that brings us to the end of the protocol. We'll go ahead and take some questions and answers. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. Let's see here. Technical difficulties. Okay, and that didn't work. All right, well, you can go ahead and put any questions that you have in the chat, or if you want to, you can raise your hand and John will be taking any of the questions.
Looks like there is a question here. Do you have any suggestions to minimize the birds' perception of us as predators?
That's a really good question. So one of the keys in doing the survey is, well, ideally you should find one spot to do your survey from. Make sure that you are close enough that you can see everything that you need to see. So the birds on the water and the burrows, but not so close that you're like literally in between chicks and the parents. So, be off to the side as much as you can. So just kind of find the most comfortable distance that you can be away from the burrows, but still be able to do what you need to do. Don't wear any bright, loud clothing. And then, just stay where you are. Don't move unless you absolutely have to. So you will probably want to take in consideration what the tide is doing. If the tide's going out, really not a problem because you're not having to move. If tide's coming in, this is where you need to kind of plan ahead. You need to figure out, okay, where can I best see everything? If I position myself in a certain spot, will I need to move? And if I need to move, then, that's something that, that's really what I would do. We can't change our size. We can't shrink ourselves. I mean, it would be really cool to just be like a fly on the bluff or something. But yeah.
So Terrence, Francis Wood, the founder of this entire program, says, make like a piece of driftwood. You're just going to be an inanimate object. And just in case, and very quiet, and in case you have guests or in case you have someone that you're surveying with, normally they're going to be in another spot, but it is not the time to visit.
Yeah, and I guess not really related to predators, but more related to just the survey itself. Definitely encourage you to not be on your phone. I've been guilty of this before and it bit me hard because I went and did a survey 1 or 2 years ago and there were no birds when I got there. So I thought, okay, well, it's raining, I don't have a Write in the Rain data sheet with me, I'm just going to type notes into my phone. So I was there for my settling period, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna get kind of my notes ready so that I can record data. And so I did that for like a minute or two. And literally when I looked up, there were magically 2 birds in front of me. Like I could have stoned them. But I mean, yeah, it's hard. I mean, you know, most of us, I think we rely on our phones to tell what time it is, which is fine. Just don't fall into the trap of really using your phone for a lot of other things. You know, that's ideally why we would have multiple people, you know, with you to be able to allow one person to record data and then allow the other person to be more the observer. So we are coming up on our break. So we've got 1 minute left. We can take one more question. I'm not seeing any hands. John, do we have anything else in the chat?
It doesn't look like it, but I have a question that you
Yes.
could clarify. What are people expected to bring, or if they have, as far as optics go? Binoculars, yay. Spotting scopes, yay. Yeah, not bring
so-
them. What's the
Yeah.
deal?
Yeah, so as far as optics go, binoculars are really all you need. The reason why we don't encourage spotting scopes is because that creates an unlevel playing field. Spotting scopes is basically cheating, but also it doesn't really provide any benefit because we're not interested in the birds that are way out there. We're just interested in birds that are associating with the colony. And birds that are associating with colony are generally going to be closer in. So the binoculars are really more for you to just be able to accurately count birds that are in groups and then get a good look at the fish that they might be holding. So, alrighty, we are now at break. So we will reconvene at 1:55 and we will go over the data sheet. Zoom recording. All right. So I've got the data sheet up here. Is that big enough for folks? Give me a thumbs or put in the chat. Not seeing anything, so I will assume. Okay, all right, great. Thanks, John. All right. So there are a few minor changes to the data sheet, but nonetheless, we will go ahead and we will go over all the aspects of the data sheet. So at the very top, we have survey week number. So the surveys, they start with week 1, the week of May 30th, and they go sequentially in order after that. So, you know, it'll be key for the team lead to make sure that the appropriate number is recorded here. And, you know, if it's unknown, we can obviously still figure it out based on the survey date. So, and this goes back to making sure that the data sheet is complete. You'll need to record the colony name along with the site name, if applicable. So site names would be, you know, like A, B, C, D, so on and so forth. If you don't have a site name, you just leave that part blank. Start time. So with start time, what you want to do is record the time that you're actually serving. This does not include your settling time. Your settling time is completely separate. Now your settling time does actually count for something. And where it does count is in tracking your total volunteer time. So in the section below, write your complete name And the person who is going to be entering the data into survey 123 is kind of the default team lead. Now, there might be someone else who is designated as team lead, but basically the star should go next to the name of the person who can be the point of contact for our data team, so that when the data team is reviewing the sheets and the entries within survey 123, if they have any questions, this is the person that will be reaching out to you. And there is space there for the name, and then right next to it is space for the actual volunteer time. And you'll see kind of down below, there is an example of routing to the nearest quarter hour, including your travel time. So from when you leave your house to when you get out to the beach, and then when you get back home. And then if you're doing data entry, you can add that time as well. And I'll go over this a little bit more later, but I'll just say that volunteer time for this project is very important to us to track. This project is grant funded, and part of our grant reporting requirement is to report out on basically what we did with the money. And this is one of the ways that we report out on that. Okay, and then next to volunteer time, so we have individual volunteer times, and then we have the total volunteer time at the bottom. Next to that, we have the count. So again, at the very start of your survey, 30 minutes later, and then, you know, at the end of the survey, that's where you put your counts. For colonies that have sites, so A, B, and C, the team lead will be responsible for not only collecting all the data from all the surveyors, but making sure that these sheets are filled out correctly, completely, so on and so forth. And one of the things that they'll be looking at is the back side of the sheet. So I'm going to scroll down real quick, but we'll come back up. So if you have 0 bird activity, something that we've had happen in the past is, well, people just leave it blank, which we understand why people would do that. So we added this little checkbox at the very top, which you can mark if there was no burrow activity. So this is a quick way for us to not have to go through an extra step in the data checking process, to where we basically have to reach out to people and be like, hey, the backside's blank. Is that intentional? Or, you know, are we missing something here? So, yeah, the team lead will be responsible for compiling the count of the birds. So at those larger colonies, they will be doing the computations to figure out what the start, middle, and end counts should be for the entire colony. All right, admin section, you can ignore. Those of you who've been doing the surveys for a little while, you might remember that we used to have people doing tied information, but we've taken that into the admin sphere. Okay, so disturbances. The way that you fill this out is based on only if the birds show a reaction. If the birds do not show any reaction, make a note of that. You can put that in the general notes, but don't record anything in this main section here. Now, if the birds do react, you want to know what the cause of the disturbance is. Some of the most common causes would be eagle, and that's probably number 1. And then Number 2 is probably going to be a toss-up between boats and or people on the beach. Some beaches, there's going to be far fewer people, so it's going to be more either an eagle or a boat. Now, there are some other cases where you might have other disturbances, and we want to be a little judicious in using the unknown category. That is kind of exceptional in terms of when we would use it. It's pretty much only used when there's absolutely no other category that the disturbance could fit into. Now we know that there are some challenges in some locations because you, for example, may not actually see until after the fact, like, oh, an eagle flew overhead, so all the birds scattered. Maybe you missed seeing that eagle, but if you see it in the tree, maybe you can make an educated guess as to adding 1 + 1 to get 2. But most of the time you should be focused on the disturbances that you can definitely document very accurately. So there's something that did change in the verbiage here, and the verbiage that changed was particularly as far as recording a yes or a no. We found out that there was a difference between what last year's version of the datasheet said as far as whether the disturbance ended before the survey ended and what was in survey 1, 2, 3. So we have gone in and we have synchronized everything. So returning folks, this is why you need to get rid of your 2021 data sheets, because those are no longer good. So if you do have a disturbance and the birds react, then you can record when the birds started reacting and then keep track of how long those birds take to return to kind of their normal behavior. Now, this isn't like birds actually necessarily returning to their original positions before they were disturbed. This is just, let's say the birds flew offshore. Once most of the birds have returned closer, that's when we consider the disturbance to be over. Now, there might be more short-term disturbances where it might only last a minute or two, and that's fine too. We still want to document those as well. And in those cases, you might have birds that just dive instead of flying, or you might have a combination. You might even have some birds that don't even care that there's a disturbance. They might just casually move a little further away, but they won't, fly away in alarm, or they won't just dive abruptly. Now, that's not to say that these behaviors cannot happen at random times for random reasons, which is why we discourage using the unknown category, because unknown is just so vague. Now, it's not saying you can't use it, but those are the caveats. So for newer people, if you haven't really spent any time or very little time observing Pigeon Guillemots, feel free to just be liberal in your note taking, and then ask questions during the debrief and learn about what you saw. How would that be categorized? Was it a disturbance? Was it not a disturbance? And we're certainly happy to provide you with some field training if you feel like after this training you're still not completely comfortable with all the different things that the survey entails. So, all right, moving on to the next part. So general notes, this is pretty free form here. So like I just mentioned, if there's something that doesn't fit into an existing section, this is where it can go. Moving on to the borough activity. Anne kind of pointed out some of the examples of some of the different scenarios that you might encounter. So one of those being the simultaneous fish delivery. So you can see here in the example, we have recorded 846 twice for gunnel. So that meant there were 2 birds with 2 gunnels going into the same burrow. And something we didn't mention is that you can have 2 birds, one being an escort, but then they both peel off. And so this is why you do need to kind of keep track of the birds even when they have aborted, because they can be a little sneaky. And when you're by yourself, it's a lot harder, but that's why we have partners. No prey, fish, they're all filled out the same way. If you have multiple activity of that one category for that specific burrow, you can record it in that one box. You don't need to record it in a separate box. Now, obviously, for folks who have done this before, not a whole lot of space on the sheet. So if there is spillover, that's fine. Just make sure that you carry over the burrow ID so that we know which burrow that data can be attributed to. And this is why the burrow IDs are important. We need to be consistent with it so that, when we get the sheets back, we know how to review the data. So again, in case you didn't catch it when we were going over it earlier, the way that we do the burrow IDs for the colonies that have multiple sites like A, B, and C, you're going to use like A1, B1, C1, C2, A2, whatever. And you have to be consistent with that from week to week. So whatever the system is decided initially, that is the system that gets used for the remainder of the season. And each row within this section will correspond to a different burrow. All right. And then burrow notes. This can be where you record information about flybys, aborted deliveries, ledge sitting, anything that is relevant to the burrows. And even, I guess, if you see birds on the water with fish, but there's no deliveries that day, it can go either here or it can go either in the general notes, either one, but that is good information to know. All right, so that brings us to the end here. Does anyone have any questions? And again, you can use the chat or you can raise your hand. And I will let John field any of those inquiries. I don't see anything in the chat. I don't see any raised hands.
Aaron, do you see my hand?
Oh, I see that now.
Okay, I just wanted to remind us on the back page, the page of borough activity, it's really important to fill in the top of that one as well. If it happens to be a separate sheet, or if it was scanned as two sheets, because if you have some data on there and we may not be able to connect it with the survey, and then we've got this wonderful data, but we don't know which site, colony, survey week, etc. So that's really important.
Yeah, that's a great point there. Not seeing other hands, not seeing, oh, looks like we've got a question there in the chat. John, you want to take that?
The borough IDs get written somewhere, so the following groups, no.
Yes.
Sorry if you went over it, so.
Yep, so all the teams and the teams that are doing the larger colonies will have multiple sets of photos referencing the boroughs that are specific to each site. And then the colonies that don't have multiple sites, same thing, they will still have photos, and it will show all of the borough locations. So your job as a surveyor, if you have an active borough that hasn't previously been documented, you will go ahead and you will circle that borough on the map, and you will give it the appropriate ID, whatever that is. Again, there's two different approaches to this. There's the method where you can label things ahead of time and then use that label for whichever borough was active, or you can do it as the boroughs become active. And looks like Anne wants to add something to this discussion. And you need to unmute.
Okay, actually, I had a question because I noticed when you were going through, it looked like that what you had screen shared was a fillable form. And I'm wondering on if it is it a fillable form?
It's not intended to be a fillable form.
Oh, okay, well, maybe that answers the question.
I just had it up in Adobe.
Oh, okay, so you would have to have Adobe then to do that.
Right.
Okay, then that answers that, never mind.
Yeah, okay, and we've got one more question that we'll take before we move on. So, short answer to that question, Carol, is yes. Okay, moving on, let's see. I believe that brings us to the mock scenario. So Anne will be doing this section here.
Okay, what the mock scenario is, it's just a little practice, almost like a little quiz from what Terrence just taught on the data sheet. So let's see here. I'm going to try to see how much time I have. 15 minutes. Terrence, do you think you can just go straight through?
Yeah, we've got 15 minutes for this slot here.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't think you folks have this yet. I'm not sure if it was attached. So I'm just going to read the problem or the question, and then I will call on someone, or raise your hand if you have the answer, and then I have the answer sheet, and we will make sure this gets out to you so you can look it over again if you need to practice some more. Okay, first question. Now these all might be slightly trick questions, so listen carefully. At 6:45, you arrive and settle in for your surveying. During your settling time, a PGU, Pigeon Guillemot, flies into borough number 3. And the question on all of these is, what do you record on your data sheet? So it was 6:45, that was your settle time, and a Pigeon Guillemot flew into borough 3. What are you going to record? See, anybody want to take a stab at that one? Silence. Some of you can show your faces and give me a thumbs up if you can hear me anyway. Oh, okay, I see some people are answering in the chat. Yeah, okay, okay, I gotta watch the chat here. Whoa, gotta get it up. Yes, that's right. Shannon says it was not an official visit. The reason being, it was during the settle time. And Carol says, how about a note? Yes, because we do want to know about all fish deliveries or visits. And so we'd like to know about that, but that would go in the notes. That's very good, guys. Okay, question number 2. At 7, you notice there are 9 PGU in the water near your site and 2 PGU far offshore. What do you record on your data sheet? Now we want everybody to participate, so take a stab at it. Okay, so Terrence is putting the questions in the chat. That's helpful because then you can remember what it is. And feel free to give an answer verbally. That's fine too. Okay. I have, okay, okay, I'm getting a few people saying 9, but so where does the 9 go? Where does this go on the data sheet? What length is it going? Yeah, this is the first count. This is the first count because 6:45 was your settle time. That means your survey hour is starting at 7. Now this is unusual. They're going an hour early. Yes. So the 9 are close by, and that would be your first count. The 2 way offshore, yeah, it is a trick question. The 2 way offshore, I would put those in the notes, you know, to acknowledge that they were there, but they're not looking like they're associated with the other birds that are interested in the colony. Okay, number 3, at 7:04, a boat drives by and disturbs the PGU that are in the water, causing them to fly off. They return 8 minutes later at 7:12. What should we record and where? Okay, it goes in the disturbance block. It doesn't say all, it just says the PGU that are in the water causes them to fly off. So we assume all of them. So what do you write in the, what are you going to record in the disturbance block? You know, basically it goes in the boat disturbance, and it would be the motor because it was said it drives by. And you put both the beginning time and the end time of the reaction of the birds. And then you write in the note part, you write what they did. All PGU flew off. Okay, want to get some other people jumping in here, please. Okay, number 4, this is an easy one, I think. At 7:18, a PGU delivers a gunnel to burrow 2. What are you going to record and where? Yes, it goes in the borough activities section. And which box does it go in? Gunnel? Yep, goes in the Gunnel box. And what do you actually write? The time, 7:18. Okay. Number 5. At 7:23, a PGU with a gunnel in its mouth flies near burrow number 4, but does not deliver the fish. What would you do? Okay, because it was not delivered, it is not data, so it goes in the notes, but it's definitely good to know. And you're definitely going to want to watch that bird with that fish to see if they make additional attempts. Let's see here, how are we doing? Okay, at 7:30, you count 6 PGU in the water near the shore. Where does that go? Okay, I want to see a new name up there this time, please. Interns are welcome to respond. New people take a stab at it. Yeah, that's your middle time count. You're right. 7:30, because you started at 7, so middle time count is 7:30. Okay, Kim, you've got 100% so far. I'm going to ask you to stop for a couple times here and get someone else in. But thanks for your enthusiasm and your good knowledge. Oh, I'm sorry, Shannon. You're not getting enough time. I can give you a little more time. All right. I'm going to skip one. I'll just mention it. At 7:34, an eagle flies over but does not disturb the PGU on the water. Therefore, the eagle was not a disturbance in this case because they did not react. Okay, we skip that one. Number 8, at 7:47, a PGU leaves burrow number 5. Okay, number 8. Yeah, okay. PGU leaves burrow number 5. Now, it doesn't mention that we saw a PGU enter burrow number 5. Normally, we do not count exits when birds come out, but if we didn't see it go in, it might have been in there earlier, right? Before we ever started. But, so we do have to count it. That's the exception. Record the exit time as a no prey visit to the burrow because it was a visit. The point is we don't want to count a visit twice. We don't count entries and exits both. That's double counting. But if we didn't see it go in, if it came in before we got there first, then we still need to count it because it was still in the burrow on a visit. I hope that's clear. Okay, number 9. And be sure to ask, if you have questions about these, be sure to put your questions in the chat. At 7:49, a Pigeon Guillemot visits borough number 5. Well, they call it a visit, but it doesn't enter. It perched on the ledge at the entrance. What do I do about that? Yeah, that's what we call a ledge sit. That's an activity we call ledge sitting. Because the bird did not go in to the burrow, it does not count as a visit. But we do want to know what their activity is. We want to know, which burrows they're interested in. So definitely put that in the notes. And if it's right by a burrow, which it says it is, it's close to 5, or it might be at the entrance, or it could also be a bird looking out, or just looking in. Just can mark it ledge sitting, but let us know which burrow it's associated with. Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna skip now because we need to move to the next section. Most 10 through 13 were pretty repetitious of the others we had. Now, I'm gonna read the last one, number 14. At 8:06, a bird delivers a fish you cannot identify to burrow number 5. What do we record? Well, Kim mentions the survey is over at 8 o'clock. So what do we do with that information then? Yeah, we want to put it in the notes because we definitely want to know about fish deliveries, and also put it in, because there's not boxes in the notes, mention that it was an unknown or that you couldn't identify it, and mention the burrow. So when you're making notes, it's nice to be specific, because then we know more what's happening at each burrow. All right, good job, you guys. We'll get this to you, and you can go over them again. And there's 4 others that I skipped that were somewhat repetitious to the others. Yay, you passed. Good job. Woohoo.
All right, great. Yeah, hopefully you all found that exercise useful. We are going to make that available on our website, and we're also going to email it out as well. So you can kind of go over it again as sort of additional practice. But sometimes I feel like some of the best practice you can have is actually just going out in the field. And so that brings us to logistics. Something that we offer, and hopefully some of the newer folks will take us up on this, is just going out and doing some practice surveys. Like I mentioned earlier, this time of year is actually pretty busy for the most part. You have a lot of activity. It's actually one of the few times where you'll see birds on the beach on a pretty regular basis. So, even if you don't want to do a practice survey, it can be good just to get out to the colony and just get to see some of these different behaviors. And now you won't see fish deliveries this time of year, at least for the vast majority of colonies, we don't see that. But, it could be interesting just to go out there and see what's happening. But other logistics. So on the data sheet, we had you recording the volunteer time. Now, volunteer time is really important to us because it is something that we have to report on, but also there is an added value in that when we are applying for certain grants, sometimes they actually have a requirement called match. And match can come in a variety of different forms. It can be, actual funds from other sources. It can be donations of labor, it can be donations of material. But for us, we basically consider volunteer time a donation of labor. And as of 2021, the average value for volunteer time was, I don't have the exact number in front of me. I looked it up the other day, but it was $33+ an hour, which is huge when you consider that the average volunteer is out on the beach for a couple hours a week for about 10 weeks. So, each person is putting in, roughly 20 hours. And then, you multiply that by however many colonies, and it starts adding up into thousands of dollars. So if you need help with recording your time in the Neon CRM system, let us know. We can help you with that. For some people, we understand that it's not the easiest to use. So there's that. As far as materials that you might need for surveying, outside of the optics, which we talked about earlier, if you have binoculars but you find that they're not very good, we do have loaners that we can provide. So just ask us. We actually have I think 10 or 12 of them. So there's no shortage of them. And that's actually one of the purposes that they're for, is loaning out for either education or research. As far as other materials or other equipment that you might need, you are going to be on the beach for an hour. So there's not always a convenient log to sit on. So you probably want to bring something to sit on, a chair, a mat, a blanket, whatever floats your boat. Or if you're on a boat, well, you've got seats on a boat. So, and we do have the prey identification guides. We didn't go over the prey visually, but I think once you look through the guide, it'll make a lot of sense. And then, let's see, I mentioned we do have brochures. And so if you would like some, let us know and we can get some to you. And then for those of you who are new, we do have the quote-unquote parking permit, which we can either mail you, you can come here and pick one up, or you can print one out at home. All right, and then that brings us to a couple other logistics. I know we're a little 1 minute behind on schedule, or 2 minutes behind on schedule now. So just a quick mention, for the first time ever, we are having a Pigeon Guillemot social on Thursday, June 23rd. It's going to be on the mainland, Burfoot Park. So we invite you to join us. If the weather's nice, we'll have a barbecue. If not, we'll have some snacks and some food and drink. We're just wanting to get together and have a good time and chat and whatever. And it's actually at a breeding colony, so there's an added bonus that we can go down to the beach and go look at guillemots if folks are inclined. And that, I think right now we're probably looking at sometime between 11 and 2. And then last but not least, we have our annual fundraiser. It's going to be here at the Nature Center. It's in person, and it's going to be on August 27th. It's a great time. It's a catered event. It's got live music. We've got raffle baskets. We have silent auction, and we have a drink bar. It's outdoors and it's partly indoors. So yeah, we hope you can join us for that as well. So that brings us to the general question and answer session. So I am going to open it up. So if anyone has questions about anything that we haven't already covered, feel free to use the chat. Feel free to
Karen?
raise your hand. Yes, Anne.
Did you, we were expecting that if people have a printer, they will print off their own data sheets. I'm sure they have a copy of the protocol with you. If there's a problem with that, let us know. I don't know if you clarified that or not.
No, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, if you don't have a printer, let us know what you need. We can get a packet to you. Yeah. Looks.
Oh, and two things to add to a hat, because you're very likely could be sitting in the sun, and sunscreen for your own health. Speaking from experience.
Yes, I mean, I was out doing a survey 2 days before the peak of last summer's heat wave, and it was not something you wanted to be sitting in the sun for an hour for. But yeah, good points there. Question about the fundraising event that is on Saturday, and let me double check and make sure you got the right date. I believe it is August, come on, computer, August 27th. And that is in the kind of like late afternoon, evening, so that runs from usually 4 to 8. And tickets and information will be on our website, and you'll probably be getting plugs about this each month. So. And there's a question here about boat surveys. We are actually still in the process of figuring out the survey schedule. We're a little behind, actually we're quite a bit behind on it. We do hope to have the schedules figured out by next week. So you will be getting contacted by us to get that determined as far as what dates that you're wanting to survey, as well as dates when we'll be finding substitutes and or covering the surveys when tide's too high. So right now we don't quite yet know what our boat situation is. All right, I'm not seeing any other hands.
Terrence, I have a quick question.
Yes, John.
Is it worth noting weather or Beaufort scale as far as
If
anything
it's
go?
especially windy, then yes, because wind could have a potential impact on the birds. I've noticed it more in the winter than I have in the summer, because we don't usually have windy conditions early in the morning. If it's going to be windy, it's usually in the afternoon. I think it's pretty rare. I mean, obviously in June is still kind of that late spring weather for us. So, that would be the one time of year where you might potentially see some abnormal weather. Most of the time it's relatively calm, so.
We went years without even any rainy days, but then things started changing. We always advertise a warm morning on the beach. That's what we hope for.
Okay, so we've got a couple more minutes here to field any questions about anything. And at 2:45, we will be switching over to the data training. For those of you who this does not apply to, you are free to leave. But we will keep the Zoom room open after we are done with training. So if folks want to pop back in and just chat with us, you're more than welcome to do so. Yeah, okay, so I'm not seeing any questions or any hands. So we're just gonna go ahead and get into the Survey 1, 2, 3 training. So I'm gonna go ahead and share Survey 1, 2, 3. And here we are. So my user interface is gonna look very different from yours, but there is this form, the Pigeon Guillemot survey form, which when you click on it, you will get some options. And the options that you have here, I'm gonna go ahead and hide my controls. Okay, so there is the inbox, which is basically all of the data that you have recorded, excuse me. And this is basically an archive of everything that you have submitted. And then up at the top, you can see there's a back arrow. So I'm going to click that. And then we're going to go into collect. So you can click anywhere on this bar. All right, so you'll see that a lot of these fields are required. They're marked with the red star. So basically it will trigger an error message at the end if none of those are filled in. So we're going to start, and we only have one option, South Sound. Then you're going to choose whichever colony you want to use. I'm going to use the test colony. You don't need to worry about location. It auto-populates except for the test colony, which doesn't even exist except in our imagination. Date. You can use the picker or you can manually enter it in. So we're just going to go with today's date. Do note that about the date, if you enter your data in the following day, it will default to that day. So you need to make sure that you select the correct date, unless you're doing the data entry the same day that you're surveying, which is ideal. You know, the observations are fresher in your mind, and well, it's just a good habit to get that done out of the way. You don't get to hear from us about, well, it's been 3 weeks and we haven't seen your data. Push your data, because you will hear from us if you don't get your data in a timely fashion. So yeah, our schedule is starting in week 3. Our data team will be doing quality checks. And so if you haven't submitted week 1 data by that point, you'll be hearing from us. All right, back to the data sheet. So we've got the start time. Again, you can manually enter it in, or you can just, you know, choose whatever time. With the time, it will default to whatever the current time is. So if you start entering in your data at, oh, I don't know, 10 p.m. at night, because you have nothing better to do, it's going to default to PM. Make sure you select AM. And same thing with the end time. So we're going to say, oh, you can use the arrows, but the arrows are kind of slow and clunky. So just click in the field, type in your number, and then be sure to select AM. Okay, you're almost more than likely going to be doing a standard 1 hour survey. There are some exceptions. We don't typically do extended surveys unless we are looking for some very specific data. But if you're interested in extended surveys, get in touch with us because we always love data. Okay, team lead. There is a very select list of people here. If you find yourself needing to enter data, but you don't already have an account for Survey 123, let us know and we will forward your names and your email to WDFW, who will then set up the account and send you an email. Now, as far as team leads go, it's generally going to be the person who is either the point of contact for your group, or it's going to be the person entering the data. That may be the same person, might be a different person, but whatever the case, select the appropriate name for the list. I'm going to select Ann. Okay, so you're gonna record the names of the people. Again, you need to put full names in here. So you're gonna put in the total volunteer time. So that's why we had it broken out on the sheet itself so that there's space to record everyone's individual time because we know that, well, not everyone drove the same distance to get there. Some people had to walk farther down the beach. So we're just going to make something up here. And again, remember, this includes your drive time from home, the amount of time it takes for you to walk from the car to your survey location, your settling time, which is typically 15 minutes. There is an exception, which is noted in the datasheet instructions, and then the 1 hour survey, obviously. So,
Yeah, round trip drive time.
correct. Yeah, and even if you're like doing something else after the survey, just double your drive time. All right, so Tide. I forgot that this is a required field in Survey 123. So I apologize that you are actually going to need to look up Tide information. We're going to put together a sort of video tutorial on how to use the Deep Zoom website. So Anne, if you want to go ahead and type that in the chat, that would be great. This website is fantastic because we use it for all of our scheduling. It's really accurate and it allows us to really fine tune the scheduling. I'm going to make something up. I'm going to say it is 5.8 feet and I believe, okay, yeah, right. So positive and negative is first and then the actual value. And then whether it's coming in or going out. All right, counts of birds. A couple of different ways. You can either type it in, so you can do that, or you can use the plus sign. If you need to change it, you can either use the plus minus or just backspace and then whatever the number that you need to enter in. It's pretty straightforward. All right, there is the first section for the general notes. So if you need to add general notes, you can put it in. You can put some sort of a title as to what kind of category it fits into. So we're just going to say whether All right, on to the next section. And actually, before we do that, you'll notice down here, there's a garbage can, and then there's a plus sign. So if you have additional notes that fits into sort of a different category, then you can do the plus sign for that. Oh gosh, I don't know what else we put in here. Well, we'll just make up some gobbledygook that works too, just for the purposes of this exercise. Okay, on to the next page. So down at the bottom, you can see there's an arrow. So we'll click that page over, and that brings us to the borough section. All right, so we want to add a borough. So we're going to click on the plus sign. It's going to expand. And then we enter in the borough ID. So we're going to say A3, just being random. We are going to record the type of visit. We're going to say we had a no pray and that it was at 7:06. All right. And then again, there's a trash can and there's a plus sign. And let's say we had a fish delivery. Let's say we had a gunnel. So we're going to click the plus sign. And then that's going to clear out this green box. And then it's going to open it up for additional information. So we're going to say there was a gunnel. And there was a gunnel at 7-Eleven. So you can basically keep adding additional visits for the same borough. Now, if you have a new borough, you need to scroll down, and then in this blue section here with the trash can and the plus sign, you click on the plus sign. And then it'll clear everything out. And then we're going to put in C2. And we're going to say that there was just a fish delivery for a sculpin, and it was at 7:27. And let's say that there was also a ledge sit here. So we would say that there was a ledge sit. And then let's also throw in another note about this. We're going to say that there was an aborted delivery. So we're going to say that this bird that had the sculpin made one pass before it finally delivered. So aborted delivery 7:25. Oops. Okay, so down here, there's a little summary about the information that we've recorded for this borough. If you need to delete that, there's this plus sign, and then it'll ask you yes, no, I'm not going to delete this. And then if you need to see the summary for the previous boroughs, you can use the arrow buttons to navigate there. So, all right. Again, we have general notes. Moving on. This brings us to the disturbance section. All right, so we're to say we had an eagle. It's the most common one that we see. And it was at 7:15 is when the birds reacted. So again, remember, it's not when the eagle showed up, it's when the birds react. And typically with eagles, reaction is pretty quick. And then we have to record when this disturbance ended. And we'll say that because it was a flyover, it was a pretty short disturbance. So really it was just a couple minutes. So 7:17, it's all clear, and the birds go back to business. So that brings us to the big question. Did the disturbance end before the survey ended? So was it before 8 o'clock? And the answer is yes. And we can actually write the note, hey, eagle flew colony. Now, something that's been brought up that kind of makes this a little bit muddled. So for the larger colonies, there's almost never going to be a disturbance that impacts the entire colony unless it's a larger colony that is small. So if you have A, B, and C kind of scrunched together, that's when you can actually have a colony level disturbance that affects all the birds. But typically, it's only going to affect one section of the colony, but we still consider that a disturbance. Okay, again, there's general notes. We're going to skip over that. We are actually going to discourage people from using the attachment section. We found that there were some issues with the quality of the imagery that we were getting. So we're going to recommend that you either scan and email to us your data sheets, which is why we pointed out, very important to either check that box on the very front that there's no burrow activity on the backside, or if you do have burrow activity, make sure you record the colony name, site ID, and the survey week number. The alternative is to use, John actually pointed us to this, the CAM scanner app. It actually has a quality control function within it, so you cannot submit bad imagery. So feel free to check that out if you're inclined. And it is available for both Apple and Android. Okay, and then last but not least, there is the survey summary, shows everything you've entered, kind of gives you a quick once over to make sure that everything's okay. And if it's good, you click on that check mark. Now there's a couple options. If you're completely done, you can click send now. If you're not, you can keep working, or you can save it in your outbox. Make sure it doesn't just stay in your outbox, because then it never gets to us, and then we come back to you, you're like, where's your data? So I'm going to send it now. It's loading. Nice thing about Survey 123 is it is something that you can do out in the field without an internet connection. And then when you get back to civilization, you can upload your data. All right, so we look in the inbox and we should show data. I think I need to refresh. Oh, not, nope, didn't need to map that. Okay, for some reason it's not showing up in my inbox, not sure why, but that is the basic process for data entry. We will take questions.
Looks like there's one here. Can one enter a burrow note found from a specific burrow that does not have a fish delivery?
Mhm. Oh, that's a good question.
Um,
I think you have to put it in general notes, because I don't think it'll take it if there's not
that is
any burrow
correct. Yeah.
activity recorded.
Yeah, so there is a slight difference between our data sheet, the way it's formatted, and the way that the data would be entered in Survey 123. So as Anne just mentioned, unfortunately, you would have to put this in the general notes. The burrow notes are very specific to a burrow. So if a burrow, we're just going to say A1, if A1 did not have any activity whatsoever previously or currently, you would not be able to enter it through the borough section. So that's how you'd handle that. All right, any other questions here? And you're always welcome to send us an email if you have any additional questions. We will plan on compiling sort of the FAQ for anything. Oh my gosh, it's Kyle. Hey, Kyle.
One second. Here, hold that.
Terrence, I think last year, at least part of the time, it was 24 hours before it actually showed up, your survey, but maybe they've got that fixed now.
Yeah, I don't know. I honestly haven't played around in it very much recently, and they actually just pushed out an update like at midnight or early this morning. So
Hey, Terrence,
yes, Daniel.
you mind if Kyle comes up and says hi for a minute?
Yeah, sure. We're wrapping up here, so give us a few minutes, and then when we're done with the Zoom, he can come on up.
What time is that?
Like in a few minutes.
All right, cool.
All right. Let's see, any other questions here? Okay, seeing none. Well, I want to thank everyone for coming to the training today. We're really excited to kick off this season. It's our 10th season, really crazy. I started out season 2 and it's been a heck of a ride. You know, we couldn't have done it without a lot of help, and you know, we're continuing to get new help, and so we're super excited. We're excited for all of our returning volunteers, and we look forward to spending a summer out on the beach and seeing what we see. So thanks for coming. Have an enjoyable rest of the afternoon, and we'll see you out there.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Okay, bye.